Judges ready? Opponent ready? Sweet. Let's get down to it. First of all, I do want to thank you all so much for being here. I know that it's kind of required, but thank you as well just for flowing and for paying attention. And thank you, of course, MiKayla, for what I'm sure is going to be a great debate. So I'm just going to go into my top case. The resolution today is creation should be taught in public schools. My definitions are going to be pretty straightforward here. I'm defining creation as the view or theory that matter, the various forms of life in the world were created by God, usually as described in Genesis. And that's from Merriam-Webster. Should, it's going to be a good idea, be taught, be one of the theories explained and discussed, just, be taught, be one of the theories taught. And then in public schools, in the primary and secondary government schools in the United States. Very simple definitions, very straightforward, I think very reasonable. And my weighing mechanism today is going to be net benefits. So that's how the round is going to be judged today. So first I'm going to start off with a few observations, just some things to keep in mind as we go through this round. First is that evolution is a theory. It's not fact. It's not rule. The Encyclopedia Britannica calls evolution the theory in biology postulating that the various types of plants, animals, and other things on Earth have their origin in other pre-existing types, and that the distinguishable differences are due to modifications in successive generations. So basically, even the Encyclopedia Britannica says that evolution is a theory, so that's one thing that we should keep in mind. Of course, creationism is a theory as well, as I define in my top case. So what we have here is two competing theories. So I will show how teaching both theories in public schools, at least in some matter, will benefit three groups. Christians, well actually creationists, evolutionists, and Americans as a whole. So first, benefits to creationists. The theory of evolution, which contradicts the faith of creationist Christians in America, will no longer be shoved down students' throats as state-sponsored fact. And this is an obvious benefit to creationists. No one theory should be taught in public schools, as that theory then becomes less of a theory and more of a law or rule, strangling diversity of thought. Especially when such a large slice of the U.S. population does not adhere to that theory. According to Pew Research Center, 33% of Americans believe in creationism. Although, by what they're teaching in public schools, none of the population believe in that, because there's not a controversy that's even established in public schools. It's just, this is just the way it is, this is fact, even though 33% of Americans believe otherwise for good reasons. Second, benefits to evolutionists. And this is the one that might seem a little bit counterintuitive. So the professor Michael Reese, a leading biologist and education expert, believes that banning creationism from the classroom is likely to backfire with children who hold sincere beliefs. That's from Telegraph. So he actually thinks that that teaching creationism in public school classrooms will actually be better for even evolutionists in the long run, because it's going to hold better with students. He said that also for those students who already side with evolutionist theory, it is good for them first to know that there is a controversy, and then know what those on the other side of the controversy are saying. The teaching of creationism will actually be better for evolutionists as well. And then third, benefits to Americans as a whole. And I think this is the most important one. This is the one that should really stick with you. If both theories are being taught, at least at some level, there's at least an attempt at neutrality. At the moment, the state, by teaching students only evolutionary theory, they're telling students that evolution is fact, and anyone who believes otherwise is wrong. This is not a neutral position towards religion. It's not a-religious, it is anti-religious. We could try to tell ourselves that evolution is a scientific theory and thus has nothing to do with religion. But the fact of the matter is that since creation is the opposing theory and the main view of religious people, evolution is nearly synonymous with non-religion. The Establishment Clause mandates government neutrality both between religion and religion, but also between religion and non-religion. And that's what we're not seeing in the status quo. And that is what I think this resolution will establish. Teaching only one theory is valuing non-religion over religion, and is a threat to American religious freedom, and thus to the freedoms of all Americans. And with that, I stand now for cross-examination.
If everyone's ready, let's go ahead and begin. Great speech, Ben. I just have a couple questions for you. First of all, can you repeat your definition of creation for me?
Yeah. The view or theory that matter, the various forms of life, and the world were created by God, usually is described in Genesis.
Okay. Is this one belief that Christians hold, or is this a broad explanation of what creation is?
What do you mean?
Let me ask you a question. Historically, throughout the centuries, since creation has been around years ago, is there one definition that historians seem to use to define creation that they seem to agree on?
I don't really know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and move down to one of the things you clarified in your observation. You said it'll be one of the theories taught in school, correct?
Yes.
Does the resolution say one of the theories, or does it simply say should be taught?
I mean, it doesn't specify either way. So I think that's open for me to interpret.
Gotcha. Well, that's open for debate. Perfect. So let me go ahead and move down. You talked about evolution being a theory.
Mm-hmm.
All right, are you saying that creationism is not a religious teaching?
That's not what I was saying, no.
Okay, so let me back up. Can we agree that creationism essentially is a religious idea that Christians believe? Creationism is a founding part of Christianity.
I think that may be true, but the fact of the matter is that it is the opposing theory to evolutionists and to evolutionary theory, and thus is scientific as well.
But you would agree that creation is a founding ideal for Christians, correct?
Sure.
But so from this, can we not agree that this would be essentially teaching religion in a school?
No.
It's not?
No.
Is there a reason why the school systems don't want creationism taught?
Well, they actually thought that there wasn't a compelling state interest, but I think there is.
Can we agree that some sides have concluded that creationism taught in school could actually pose a conflict for religious beliefs being influenced or taught to students?
I'm sure you showed that in your speech.
Perfect. Awesome. No further questions.
Anytime.
Sorry guys, I will apologize. I have close to no voice. Alright, if everyone's ready, alright, then we'll go ahead and begin. Quote, education's purpose is to replace an empty mind with an open one. It's because I agree with Malcolm Forbes that I believe the exploration of science should be about teaching, not about religious institutions. So what I'm going to be doing in this speech is, first I want to thank you all for coming and debating. I'd like to thank Ben, I'd like to thank the audience for listening today. I'm really looking forward to today's debate. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to respond to Ben's case, and then I'll be refuting his case and by giving a couple off cases through mine. So first of all, let's go ahead and look at the flow. Now, Ben's first point was defining creationism, and this will kind of be, I guess, my most important point that's going to be fighting against his case, is because I believe historically there actually has been a defined definition of creationism. And I'd like to point out that the way Ben defined it was a very interesting definition, but it was also very broad, and doesn't lend the debate in a way that would pursue something that's more structural to creation. So he defined it essentially as something that has been made by God in Genesis. But we can actually agree that many different scientists, many different creationists, and very many different religious thoughts have actually defined creationism to be very different things. So by his definition, it's just pretty broad. So for that reason, I'd actually like to bring up a clarifying definition that I think really satisfies what we're looking for in debating creationism today, and that will be the definition of historically understood as the six-day Judeo-Christian account of the origin of all things God accepted. And I think this is important because historically we've seen that six-day creation has been the bright line for what creation is. It's differed throughout time, but six-day creation has kind of been the historical standpoint that many different creationists or even scientists have chosen to take. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and respond to his definitions by saying my first response is a 7-day creation. I think the affirmative has defined this too broad, and I think this is more specific in today's debate. So his first point talked about being one of the theories taught, and I want to clarify that in the resolution it says creation should be taught in public schools. I do want to clarify that the resolution does not say should be one of the theories taught in school. It says should be taught. So the affirmative stance and the affirmative burden today is to prove that creation and creation alone by the resolution should be taught in school. To implement or even to affirm, excuse me, I'm really sorry, to affirm something else would be counterproductive to the resolution today. He's simply supposed to affirm creation, and that's the idea we're supposed to debate in public schools, not all ideas. That's my second response. So in association to his points, he talked about this first point of benefits to Christian, and I'd like to respond to this by saying that science should be taught, not religion. We look at institutions today, many different educators and many past court cases have actually knocked down the fact that they should not be teaching religion in schools. When we allow this to happen, or when we debate whether or not it should, it opens the door that all religions should be taught in school. And students should be taught about science, they should be taught about math, they should be taught about things that they agree on, not necessarily have Christianity or religion stuffed down their throats, because the idea of religion is a beautiful faith, and it talks about something that is chosen, not something that's pushed down someone's throat by compulsion. That's actually counterproductive to the Christian faith. I believe we should keep school to the students and allow the educators to educate them in a way that simply teaches things that we agree on, things that we all have in common. So my third point in refutation to his second point, he talked about benefits to evolution. And I actually like to talk about the fact that there has never been fair ground in educational institutions, and they haven't really wanted creation in the school. While he can talk about benefits to education and his second point, and benefits to Christians, really there isn't a benefit because it's bringing religion, it's bringing this idea, which is not just a theory, it's actually a foundational ideal in Christianity into a school. It's bringing religion into the classroom, which has been clashed back and forth through many different court cases and has been struck down because it's not only offensive, but actually not the purpose of education. And that is my stance as the negative today, is that teaching creation, while may be a great idea and a great religious thought, it is not the goal of education. His third and final point is benefits to America. So I'd essentially like to go ahead and cross-apply this to my previous 2 points. I really don't believe there are necessarily benefits to Americans because education teaches common ground, and this could actually be offensive to those of other religious thoughts in the classroom. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and go down the flow and give a couple off points. So first of all, my negative stance is essentially this, is that creation should not be taught exclusively as the only truth, and that is what the affirmative, by definition and by the resolution, is supposed to affirm today, creation, not just all religions. But my stance as the negative is that creation should not be the only ideal. So let's go ahead and look at point 1, is the Christian perspective. And my subpoint A under this is forced gospel isn't gospel at all. Creationists and creation that is taught is disingenuous if we force students to be able to recite it for a test or force them to understand an ideal they may or may not agree with. It also requires all kids to believe something of one religious group's perspective that discourages the agency of authenticity that is required of one making a profession of faith. The education should offer a variety, not just subjectivity. So in addition, we can look at a second subpoint, which is B, inner Christian communities disagree. Creation with a capital C, the gap theory, 6-day creation, these are all disputed by Christians today, by scientists. So we don't actually all agree on what Christianity, what creation is today. There's actually a discrepancy, and this discrepancy would cause the ability to teach this idea of creation in the school to be harder because we don't actually all agree on what these ideals are. From the well-informed Christian perspective, all possible exegetical interpretations of origins should be considered, not just exclusively a 6-day creation. We have to look at other ideals in the school. Second point is secular contemporary perspective, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in my speech, but there are separate spheres we have to look at. And then secondly, we should teach that a science that we all agree on in schools. That'll be my main point in my next speech, is that we should be teaching a science and teaching an idea like math that we all agree on.
Judges ready? Opponent ready?
Yes.
Sweet, let's get into this. First, I do want to thank you for a great speech. I'm going to ask a few clarifying questions. Not much. First of all, was the resolution only creation should be taught in public schools?
I believe it said creation. It didn't
Right.
include other ideas, so I think that's
Okay.
important to clarify.
Okay, great. And next, excuse me. Your first off case was Christian perspective,
That's correct.
and your second off case was secular contemporary perspective.
Yes, that is
And
correct.
I didn't really catch anything on that point. Could you just give me like a sentence on
Sure,
that?
sure. Two of the things I wanted to harp into that idea is separate spheres. We should
Okay.
essentially, like I talked about my first point, is leave creation or leave religion to
Right.
itself and leave school to teach the students, the school. And then my second point talked about why all these different religions actually accept common ground. We should be teaching things we agree on in school, like A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Those are the things that
Right.
many different religious backgrounds do agree on. And that's the purpose of education.
Great, thank you. And that's really it.
Okay.
And I'm gonna want that. Thank you. Judges ready? Opponent ready? Sweet. All right. Do want to thank my opponent for a great speech. This is going to be a fun round. So I'm just going to kind of go through her flow, go through her responses to my case, especially on top case. And then I'm just going to go through her off case real quick. And so first, she kind of debated with me on my definition of creation. But I think all she did was just expound upon one single part of my definition and didn't really change anything. So I don't really think that we even need to consider this, or I really even need to respond to it. Like that, what she said is as described in Genesis. I mean, all she was doing was explaining that, so thank you. So second, she talked about how under the resolution it should be one of the theories taught. But, okay, so let's consider other resolutions like this. So if it said science should be taught in public schools, that doesn't mean science should be the only subject taught in public schools. It just means that science should be taught. Something being taught does not negate everything else being taught. So it is one of the theories taught, and also it is my job to scope this around, and if I'm being reasonable, then that's okay. And she didn't show me being unreasonable. So next, I'm just going to kind of go through her responses. And she kind of just responded to all three of my points in the same way, which is basically science, not religion. But she tried to say that creationism is one of the fundamental Christian ideals, but then she also said in her off case that Christians don't believe, don't always agree on creationism. If creationism is one of the fundamental Christian ideals, then why do not all Christians believe in it? That doesn't make much sense to me. I think it kind of negates that part of what she said in her on case. What she said was science, not religion. And we kind of touched on this in her cross-ex with me. She asked me whether creation was scientific or religious. I said it's both. And I think that at this point, evolution is nearly both as well. Because of the debate, because of the controversy, it has been tinged with religious perspective as well. So, I mean, at this point, it has become anti-religious in a way because it contradicts what she called a fundamental part of the Christian perspective. So it is non-religion. And I would also like to point out that this is not saying that no other origin story from any other religion can be taught. I'm not going to say that. I mean, I think it would be great for other religious people's creation story to be at least referenced as well as a competing theory. I'm not just saying that it should be the Judeo-Christian perspective. So yeah, that her first, her kind of only response to my points was science, not religion, but it's both. It's both. And there is a controversy. She talked about, in her second point, I think she kind of contradicted this as well. Oh, I'm out of time, man. Used to be a negative.
Ben, can I borrow your timer?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thanks. everyone's ready, we'll go ahead and begin. There's a time for religion and there's a time for education. But it is my stance as a negative that can actually be counterproductive to Christianity, or even to the belief of creationism, to have it taught in schools. Which is why I believe that creation should not be taught for several different reasons, for the Christian perspective, but also due to counter-contemporary beliefs. So let's go ahead and look at a couple things in today's speech. But before I do, I want to go ahead and thank you all for watching today. I'd like to appreciate my opponent for debating. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I have 3 responses to his last case. First of all, he talked about the 7-day creation. I want to go ahead and be clear and state that I think I kind of re-clarified his definition. There doesn't seem to be a conflict here, but essentially we're defending a 7-day creation. He said I just kind of helped clarify that, and that's going to be important in today's debate. So I'm glad we can have common grounds. So his first point was that science should be taught. He talked about it's one of the theories taught, and I do want to clarify again, this is my refutation, is religion out of the classroom. Religion out of the classroom. He talked about it's one of the theories, but I want to emphasize to you that creation is more than a theory. Creation is a religious belief. And as a Christian, I believe there's important ideals to Christianity, but it actually being taught in school could be counterproductive to the Christian faith. It is a religious belief, and it is more than just a theory. I want to clarify that, and that'll be an important point in today's speech. So his second point talked about the creation theory should be taught. He talked about a couple different things, and he talked about creationism. We should teach both, but I want to go ahead and clarify the affirmative burden. He says that he as the affirmative has the ability to scope, and he said it's essentially reasonable. But on your flow, it asks you to look at something which is reasonable. It asks you to vote on something that is reasonable, or it asks to define something reasonable. I'd like you to look at the resolution. Creation should be taught in public schools. I would argue as the negative, it is not reasonable to infer that creationism, along with all other theories and all other thoughts of theories in science and math, should be included in this resolution. The thing that it states in the resolution that we have to stick to, looking at what it calls for us to debate, is creation. Whether or not it should be taught, not creation and all other theories, and that is the affirmative burden. That is what the affirmative is supposed to uphold in today's debate. And I'd like to argue that creation should not be taught, and I'm going to talk about 3 reasons why. So essentially in his last speech he talked about science should be taught, creation theory should be taught, and then creationism in both. So let me go ahead and go back to my off case and kind of refute a couple ideas and emphasize to you why it's actually not as important to have creation in the public schools. So first of all, I talked about the Christian perspective. He said it's beneficial to Christians in the very first part of his speech, but I'd actually like to point out, as I did in my last speech, that it's actually a forced gospel, and enforcing this idea upon individuals who are students who are taught to be educated, to be taught math or science. It's to give them the tools to think, to allow their mind to be open. It's not giving them a perspective, it's giving them an education. It's teaching them what the laws of physics are, it's teaching them what chemistry is. And those things that we can all agree on from different religious backgrounds are what should be taught in schools. We should leave science to the scientists and leave the religious thoughts to the religious. Those things can be cultured beautifully in a Christian home. That's what it means when you have Christian students who go to a public school. They learn secular ideas. They learn ideas that we all agree upon. They don't learn a religion in school. So under that, the inner Christian communities, they do disagree on different things. They disagree on the gap theory, the 6-day theory creation, these different ideals, even the age of the earth. These are different things that creationists disagree on. So even if we were to teach creation in a system, in a school, there would be discrepancies because there's not just one theory of creation. There are actually many different theories, even within a bubble of 7-day creation. People do agree on different things. So I'd like to go ahead and look at the second point I talked about roughly in my last speech, which is secular contemporary perspective. And I'd like to go ahead and clarify a couple main things under this idea. His first, separate spheres. I talked about leaving that. Essentially, if we follow the affirmative stance that a worldview should be taught in science, then atheists, Buddhists, Mormons, and Muslims can teach what they want because we're opening the door for religious thought to be taught in education. My second subpoint into this idea is B, we should teach a science that we all agree upon. If we look at a couple different things, all religions disagree on origins, but we do concede on scientific grounds. One of my brothers is an atheist, but we agree on science. We agree on how education is taught, because there's common ground within religions. Specifics don't matter when we need to look at what we do agree on, which is science. All worldviews, Buddhism, Hinduism, atheism, Christianity, they all accept science. They accept what is taught. They accept genetics. They accept chemistry. They accept physics. Newton's laws of physics. What goes up must come down. What's the climax here? The climax is my third and final point, which is education should be consistent. It should be consistently taught. The main thing here is truth. You can tag this as truth. Many disagree on a few particulars of the result, but the system, due to religious conviction, should be the same. We should pursue truth. We should allow students to be given tools, but allow them essentially to make up their own minds. Thank you.
Oh, can I have a timer?
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Judges ready? Opponent ready? Sweet. Since this is my last speech, I do want to thank you all so much for being here, for flowing, for judging. I'm sure I'm going to get very good criticisms afterwards. And of course, thank you, MiKayla, for a great debate. So I do want to finish this up, and I am going to have to go rather quickly because I do want to respond to a few things. First, I'm going to kind of respond to her second point because I couldn't actually get to her first point earlier. That was my bad. I ran out of time. But I did kind of respond to her second point, so I'm going to kind of respond to her second point a little bit more. So she said that we should teach things that we agree on. We don't agree on science. Not every religious background agrees on evolution. I think that I've shown that in today's debate. So I mean, by her logic there, we shouldn't be teaching really biology at all, because so many people disagree about biology. So many people disagree about evolution. So evolution shouldn't be taught as well. And so that just leaves out a huge hunk of science that we can't teach because not everyone agrees on it. And she talked about truth. Truth is a very hard thing to find. And the simple fact of the matter is that evolution at this point, it is not truth, it is theory. And so if we can't teach evolution or creation, I mean, I would say that we should, if nothing else, we should teach evolution. She's saying that we should teach neither. That's ridiculous, because then we're not teaching science at all. We're just kind of leaving it open because we don't agree on science. And next, I'm just going to go through some voters. Some reasons that you can feel comfortable in voting for the affirmative today. And I wish that I could respond to her voters, but she actually didn't have any. So I am going to go through mine real quick. So first, theory. Theory. Evolution is a theory. It's not fact. It's not truth. We don't know if it's true or not. There's a controversy between 2 or 3 or 4 competing theories, and we at least need to address the first two in education. That is something that should be taught. Students should be taught that there is a controversy. And second is the benefits I brought up, the benefits to creationists, to evolutionists, and to Americans as a whole. And that brings me to my third and final voter, which I think is the most important, and that is neutrality. Neutrality. The idea of the Establishment Clause mandates neutrality between religion and non-religion. What we have right now is the state valuing non-religion over religion. What we have right now is a state-sponsored rule, law, fact, which it's not. Evolution is not fact. It is theory, and only one of the theories out there. So should it be taught like it is the only theory out there? Like it is the only reasonable explanation for everything? No, it shouldn't. Not everyone agrees on it. I showed that 33% of Americans believe in creation. And with that, I stand down and urge an affirmative ballot.